welcome to my channel. Subscribe, listen, and enjoy my stories every day. The wheels of my suitcase echoed eerily through the empty halls of the airport. It was just past midnight when my flight landed, 2 days earlier than expected. A mechanical issue with the project had cut the business trip short, a rare stroke of luck, I had thought. I was eager to surprise Claire with my early return, to spend a couple of extra days just with her before diving back into the relentless grind of my job. The drive home was quiet, the streets of our usually bustling city were nearly deserted, bathed in the soft glow of streetlights. I parked in the driveway, noticing that Claire's car was there but not in its usual spot, slightly skewed as if hastily parked. A small frown tugged at my lips, but I brushed off the odd feeling as I unlocked the front door. The house was dark and silent, save for a faint, rhythmic creaking from upstairs, almost imperceptible, but unmistakably there. I left my suitcase by the door and padded softly up the stairs, my heart beginning to race with a mix of anticipation and a creeping dread I couldn't quite place. As I approached our bedroom, the muffled sounds became clearer, voices. My heart sank. The door was ajar, a sliver of light casting a long shadow across the hall. I paused, every instinct screaming at me to turn back, but I pushed the door open. The scene before me was like a physical blow. Claire and my boss, Mark, tangled in the sheets of our bed. The shock rooted me to the spot, my mind reeling, unable to utter a word. They hadn't noticed me yet, lost in their betrayal. How could you send me away and then? I finally managed, my voice a mix of fury and disbelief. Mark's head snapped up, his expression one of sheer panic, while Claire's face crumpled into a mask of shame. Jack, Save it, I snapped, cutting her off, the cold fury settling in my veins. I felt betrayed, humiliated, but more overwhelmingly, I felt furious. The kind of fury that could drive a man to ruin. They scrambled apart, words tumbling over each other, apologies, excuses, pleas. I barely heard them. A terrible plan was already forming in my mind, a way to make them pay for the deception, for the humiliation. To think I trusted you both, I said quietly, my voice deadly calm amidst their chaotic apologies. I turned and left the room, their calls fading behind me. As I walked down the hall, the framework of my revenge began to take shape. I would need to be careful, methodical. There was a lot at stake, not just their reputations but mine as well. But I was determined, they would regret the day they decided to betray Jack Mercer. The house felt alien now, a place stripped of its warmth and safety. I gathered a few essentials, threw them into a bag, and left. The night air was chilly as I stepped outside, the darkness somehow comforting. I needed time to think, to plan. But one thing was clear, by the time I was done, Claire's life would never be the same. The cold morning air bit into my skin as I sat in the dim light of a 24-hour diner, a cup of black coffee growing cold in front of me. Across from me sat Tom, an old college buddy and the only person I felt I could trust with the magnitude of what I was planning. He looked concerned, his eyebrows drawn together as he listened to my recount of last night's debacle. Jack, are you sure you want to go through with this? Revenge can get messy, Tom said, his voice low. I nodded, my jaw set. I've never been surer of anything. They crossed a line, Tom. I can't just let it go. Tom sighed, rubbing his temples before replying. All right, what do you need from me? I need information. Mark has been up to some shady dealings at work, insider trading, maybe worse. I want to expose him, not just for this affair, but for everything. Tom's eyes narrowed, a spark of intrigue lighting them up. I might know someone who can help with that. An investigator. But it won't be cheap. Money's not an issue, I assured him, pushing my untouched coffee aside. Set it up. As Tom texted on his phone, arranging a meeting, I turned my thoughts to Claire. Hurting her wasn't just about revenge, it was about reclaiming some semblance of control over my shattered life. I needed something that hit hard, something that would tarnish her seemingly flawless image. A plan began to form as Tom snapped his phone shut. He'll meet us tomorrow. Early morning, at his office. He's discreet, one of the best. Thanks, Tom, I said, feeling a grim satisfaction settling in. There's one more thing. Claire's charity event next week. I think it's time her little embezzlement becomes public knowledge. Tom raised an eyebrow. Embezzlement? A bit from the charity funds. Not much, but she's been covering it up for months. I've got the bank statements and emails to prove it, I explained, the words tasting bitter on my tongue. Damn, Jack. You're playing with fire, Tom replied, but he was already pulling out his phone again, probably thinking of someone else who could help with the public exposure. We parted ways with a plan in action. As I drove away from the diner, the first light of dawn was breaking across the sky, casting long shadows on the road ahead. I felt no joy in these proceedings, only a necessary resolve. If all went according to plan, by next week, both Mark and Claire would feel the full consequence of their betrayal. As I arrived at my temporarily rented apartment, my phone buzzed. It was a message from an unknown number, simply saying, "We need to talk." See. Claire's plea for dialogue was the last thing I wanted. I stared at the message, then locked the phone and placed it on the table. She would have her chance to talk, but not on her terms. The game had changed, and I was now holding the cards. This was just the beginning. The early morning fog clung to the city streets as I made my way to the investigator's office. The nondescript building was tucked away on a quiet side street, a place you'd miss if you weren't looking for it. Tom was already there, waiting by the door with a man whose presence was as unassuming as the surroundings. "Jack, this is Mike. He's the best in digging up dirt that's meant to stay buried," Tom introduced us with a nod. Mike, a middle-aged man with sharp eyes and a firm handshake, greeted me. "Heard you got a situation that needs handling discreetly," he said, leading us into his office. Once inside, I laid out everything, Mark's likely insider trading, the affair, and my suspicions about other illegal activities. Mike listened intently, tapping notes into his laptop as I spoke. "We can start with his financials and communications. Do you have access to any of his accounts or devices?" Mike asked, looking over his glasses. "Not directly. But I can get you into our office network." "I have clearance," I replied, feeling a mix of apprehension and adrenaline at the illicitness of it all. "Good. I'll need a couple of days to set up the surveillance and gather evidence." "If he's as dirty as you say, he won't be clean at work either," Mike said confidently. As I left the office with Tom, my phone buzzed. It was Claire again, more insistent this time. I ignored the message, my focus narrowed on the task ahead. Later that day, I visited the venue of Claire's upcoming charity event, posing as an anonymous donor. I met with the event coordinator, a young woman named Lisa who was more than eager to give a tour to a potential big donor. "The event will be right here in the main hall. It's going to be quite spectacular," Lisa beamed, unaware of the storm that was about to hit. "And the finances for the event? They must be quite substantial," I probed, testing the waters. Lisa nodded, pulling out a tablet to show me the budget. "We are very transparent with our funding. Everything is accounted for, down to the last penny." I nodded, taking note of the figures. "Would you mind if I take a look at the records? Just a routine check before I commit." Surprised but obliging, Lisa led me to the office where the financial records were kept. As she went to fetch the documents, I quickly inserted a USB drive into her computer, a drive loaded with tracking software that Mike had provided. It was a risky move, but necessary. "Just being thorough," I said with a smile when Lisa returned. She seemed to buy it, and our meeting ended with her none the wiser. Back in my car, I checked my phone again. Claire had left several messages now, some pleading, others angry. But there was one from Mark that caught my eye. "We need to talk, Jack. Call me." Ignoring them, I called Mike to confirm the installation was successful. "You're all set. Now, we wait," he said. As the city lights flickered on with the coming dusk, I felt a twinge of regret for the inevitable fallout of my actions. But it was too late for second thoughts. I was in too deep now, driven by a need for retribution that overshadowed everything else. The stage was set, the players were unaware, and the curtain was about to rise on a spectacle none of them were prepared for. The day of the charity event arrived, a perfect setting for the final act of my revenge. The grand hall was decked in elegant decor, the guests dressed in their finest, all unaware of the storm brewing just beneath the surface. I arrived early, blending into the crowd, my eyes scanning for Claire and Mark. Mark spotted me first, his face a mask of concern and anger as he approached. "Jack, we need to sort this out," he hissed, pulling me aside into a quiet corner. "I agree, Mark. We absolutely do," I replied, coolly. "But maybe not in the way you're hoping." Before he could respond, Claire joined us, her face pale, her eyes searching mine for some sign of the old warmth. "Jack, please, can we talk? I know I've made mistakes, but..." I cut her off, my voice firm. "Save it, Claire. I know about everything. And soon, everyone else will too." As the words left my mouth, the sound of chaos erupted from the entrance. Mike had arrived with 2 police officers and a warrant for Mark's arrest, the result of weeks of surveillance uncovering not just insider trading but also significant embezzlement from his company. Mark turned white, his shock evident as the officers read him his rights. Claire gasped, her hand flying to her mouth, her gaze flitting between me and Mark in dawning realization. "But how?" Mark stammered. "Jack planned this." "All of it," Claire said, her voice breaking. It was not a question, she knew, her eyes filled with a mix of admiration and fear. "Yes," I said simply. "You sent me away, but I came back at the right time." As they led Mark away, I turned to Claire. Her expression was one of someone who had just been through a storm, but there was something else: relief. She was free from Mark's manipulation, and despite everything, that felt right. "Jack, I don't know what to say," she whispered. "Say nothing," I replied. "Just learn from this. Maybe find a way to make things right." With the main spectacle over, I felt a strange peace settling over me. I had come for revenge but found justice instead. Maybe it was time to let go of the anger. I was ready to move on, to rebuild from the ashes of this debacle. As I was about to leave, Tom approached, clapping me on the shoulder. "You okay, man?" "Yeah, I think I finally am," I replied. Just then, my phone buzzed. It was a text message from an unknown number. I opened it, and my breath caught. The message read, "Impressive work, Jack. Ever thought of using those skills for something bigger? Meet me tomorrow. Let's talk." The message was signed with just an initial, M. Curiosity piqued, I pocketed my phone. It seemed my skills had caught the eye of someone else, someone who appreciated the art of the strategic takedown. As I left the hall, I couldn't help but feel that a new chapter was just beginning, one possibly even more intriguing than revenge.